Hello, seekers of shadowed histories, and welcome once again to Grim Histories for Sleep. Tonight, we journey into the heart of a city under siege, to London during the terrible nights of 1940 and 1941, a period history remembers as the Blitz. We'll walk the blackout-shrouded streets, huddle in makeshift shelters, and bear witness to the resilience of a people facing nightly devastation from the skies. But our exploration doesn't end with the thunder of falling bombs and the shriek of air raid sirens. Tonight, we don't just endure the Blitz. We delve into the whispered folklore that crawled through the oppressive darkness, unsettling tales of gremlins, unseen saboteurs, mischievous and often malevolent sprites, said to prey on machinery, on morale, and on minds pushed to their breaking point. These were the tiny, invisible enemies that added a chilling, eternal threat to the devastation raining from the skies. So, as the familiar comforts of your world recede, and the deep, suffocating darkness of wartime London envelops you, consider this. Could you survive facing not only the shattering bombs of the Luftwaffe and the crushing weight of the blackout, but also the gnawing paranoia that tiny, unseen hands were working in the shadows, turning your own equipment, your own refuge, your very sanity against you? If these descents into the atmospheric dread of the past offer you a unique form of nocturnal solace, please do consider liking this video and subscribing to Grim Histories for Sleep. Your companionship on these shadowed journeys is always deeply valued, and as the city holds its breath, tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what hour the darkness holds sway in your corner of the world. It helps us feel a little less alone in the long watches of the night. Now, adjust your blackout curtains. Ensure your gas mask is within reach, though we pray you won't need it for its intended purpose. The sirens are about to wail, and in the suffocating darkness that will follow, more than just bombs await. The year is 1940. The month, a cold, damp November. The city, London. You are Arthur, a man who, before all this, might have been a clerk, a shop assistant, a factory hand. Now, you are an air raid precautions warden, a small cog in the vast machinery of civil defense, responsible for your little sector of a defiant, terrified, and increasingly battered East London. The acrid, pervasive smell of smoke from last night's fires and the fires from the night before that still clings stubbornly to your woolen ARP overalls, a constant reminder of the destruction that has become a nightly ritual. The distant, mournful wail of an all-clear siren has only just faded into the gray, pre-dusk sky, but the silence it leaves behind is never truly peaceful. It is heavy, pregnant, expectant. Your first challenge tonight, even before the German bombers inevitably return with the darkness, is the flickering, temperamental gas lamp in the cramped, sandbagged ARP post. It's been playing up all week, casting long, dancing shadows that writhe like living things. Young Miller, your fellow warden, fiddles with the valve, muttering about damp in the lines. But Old Man Hemmings, a veteran of the Great War who has seen too much, shakes his head, his voice a low rumble. It ain't the pressure, lad, and it ain't the damp. It's them little blighters again. Gremlins. He spits the word out like a curse, his eyes darting into the darkest corners of the post. You try to dismiss it, as you always do. Stress, fatigue, but tonight, the old man's certainty and the lamp's stubborn refusal to burn steadily plants a tiny, cold seed of unease in your already weary mind. As dusk bleeds into the cold November night, the city of London holds its collective breath. The brief respite afforded by the daylight hours, filled with the grim tasks of clearing rubble, tending to the injured, and queuing for meager rations, is over. Darkness, once a blanket of peace, is now the herald of terror. And you, Arthur, an ARP warden in your small patch of the East End, feel the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in your stomach. Your role in this nightly drama is crucial, yet fraught with peril. You are the guardian of the Blackout, the guide to the shelters, the first responder to the chaos that inevitably follows the rain of bombs. It's a responsibility that weighs heavier with each passing night, each fresh wave of destruction. In a modern city, emergency services are vast, technologically advanced. Here, you are often armed with little more than a steel helmet, a whistle, a torch, and a grim determination. The ARP post, a sandbagged tobacconist's shop, is your small island in the encroaching darkness. Besides yourself and Old Man Hemmings, there's young Bertie Miller, barely 18, and trying desperately to project a confidence he doesn't feel. The faulty gas lamp, despite Bertie's continued fiddling, still sputters and dims erratically, casting their faces in a ghoulish, shifting light. Hemmings, predictably, continues his litany. "Mark my words, Warden," he says, his voice a low growl. "It's them gremlins. Chewing on the pipes they are. My nephew, Alf, he's ground crew with the RAF down in Kent. Swears blind they're in the Spitfires, fiddling with the wires, drinking the fuel. Says the pilots see 'em clear as day. Little green blighters with mischievous grins, right before an engine coughs. You try to offer a rational explanation. Wartime shortages, leading to poor quality gas fittings, the building settling from nearby bomb blasts, even rats. But Hemmings just shakes his head, his eyes dark with an unshakable conviction. The stories of gremlins, once a dismissible piece of Royal Air Force banter, a way to explain away inexplicable mechanical failures under the stress of combat, have begun to seep into civilian life, carried on the fearful whispers of a populace desperate for any explanation, however outlandish, for the chaos that engulfs them. Suddenly, the silence outside is shattered. It begins. The air raid siren. Not the short, intermittent, all clear, but the sustained, mournful, rising and falling wail that Londoners have come to call the wail of the banshee. It's a sound designed to curdle the blood, a promise of imminent death from the skies. But tonight, there's something subtly wrong with it. A slight distortion, a metallic screech that wasn't there before, as if its gears are grinding, its throat choked. Hemmings catches your eye. A grim, "I told you so" look a passing between you. You tell yourself it's just a worn-out mechanism, another casualty of the relentless war. But the thought, like a splinter, lodges itself in your mind. Your duties begin immediately. "Helmets on. Grab your kits," you order, your voice hopefully betraying none of the unease you feel. You step out into the pitch-black street, the blackout absolute, a suffocating blanket of ink, your torch beam, itself seeming weaker than usual, cuts a small, lonely sway. The familiar drone of unsynchronized aero engines, the dreaded sound of the Luftwaffe bomber formations, is already a faint throb in the northern sky. Growing steadily louder, shouts echo in the darkness as people scurry from their homes, ghostly figures heading for the nearest Anderson shelter in their back garden, or the larger public shelter in the crypt of St. Swithin's Church. Back in the ARP post, Bertie is trying the telephone, the direct line to the sector control, to report that your post is manned and ready. He jiggles the receiver hook. "Dead, Arthur. Line's completely dead," he exclaims, his voice tinged with panic. You try it yourself. Nothing. Not even a crackle. It was working an hour ago. Now, utterly silent. Gremlins in the wires. Hemmings mutters from the doorway, where he's peering up at the sky. His old soldier's senses alert for the first whistle of a falling bomb. Frustration and a deeper unease begin to gnaw at you. The lamp, the siren, now the telephone, all essential. Is it just a string of bad luck? The inevitable decay of a city under constant bombardment? Or is Hemmings, with his talk of mischievous, unseen saboteurs, tapping into a truth too unsettling to contemplate? The first distant crump of anti-aircraft fire, the ack-ack guns opening up, punctuates the thought. Then, a much closer, earth-shaking roar as the first bombs begin to fall on a neighboring sector. The floor of the ARP post shudders violently. Plaster dust rains down from the ceiling, and the already faulty gas lamp, with a final, defiant hiss, sputters and dies, plunging the three of you into near total darkness, just as the shrill, insistent ringing of the auxiliary bell, a manual line for urgent calls if the phone fails, signifies a frantic message trying to get through about an incident in your immediate vicinity. The night has barely begun, and already the unseen enemy seems to be hard at work. The urgent call, relayed by a breathless runner after you manage to get the auxiliary line working with a frustrating delay, the handle of the magneto stiff and grinding as if filled with sand, directs you to the public shelter beneath the railway arches a few streets away. Not for a major incident, thankfully, but to assist with overcrowding and to calm frayed nerves, as a particularly heavy wave of bombing seems to be targeting the nearby docks, leaving Hemmings to man the increasingly unreliable post. You and Bertie make your way through the blacked-out, debris-strewn streets, the night alive with the terrifying symphony of war, the roar of unseen bombers overhead, the sharp crack of anti-aircraft shells, the sickening whistle of falling bombs, and the ground-shaking whump of their explosions, some alarmingly close. The shelter under the railway arches is a grim testament to London's resilience and its desperation. It's a vast, brick-lined space, damp and cold, dimly lit by a few precious battery-powered lanterns and the occasional flickering candle. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale tobacco smoke, cheap disinfectant, and fear. Hundreds of people are crammed inside, a cross-section of East End life. Families huddled together on blankets, elderly couples sharing a thermos of weak tea, soldiers on leave trying to sleep, children alternately whimpering or playing with a strange, subdued energy. This is life during the Blitz, stripped bare. Contrast this with the safety and sanitation of a modern emergency shelter, or the simple peace of a quiet night in your own bed. Here, survival is a communal, nightly struggle, lived out in the shadow of death. Your job as an ARP warden is to be a presence of calm and authority, to offer what little assistance you can, to enforce the shelter rules, and to try and maintain morale. But tonight, even your practiced cheerfulness feels thin. The stories you dismissed from Hemmings are finding echoes here. In the hushed, anxious conversations of the sheltered, you overhear a woman complaining to her neighbor that her Anderson shelter's new corrugated iron sheet, the one her husband spent all day fitting, buckled for no reason, as if a child had jumped on it, though no child was near. A factory worker, his face smudged with grease, even in the dim light, tells a tale of a vital lathe in his munitions plant that seized solid, its gears inexplicably stripped, just as they were rushing a critical order. "Gremlins," his companion mutters knowingly. "My brother in the merchant navy, he says they're worse at sea. Get in the compasses, they do. Lead ships onto the rocks. These are small things, easily attributable to wartime stress, shoddy manufacturing due to shortages, or simple accidents in the dark, cramped conditions. Yet, the stories are spreading, taking on a life of their own. It's a new layer of fear, an invisible, insidious threat that operates alongside the very visible terror of the Luftwaffe. As you move through the shelter, offering a word of encouragement here, checking on an elderly man there, you experience a few small, unsettling incidents. Yourself, your own supposedly reliable torch, the one with fresh batteries you put in just this afternoon, flickers and dies, plunging you into momentary darkness until you can find your spare. You set down your tin mug of heavily sweetened, watery tea on a relatively stable crate, turn to speak to someone, and when you turn back, it's overturned. The precious liquid spilled, though no one was near enough to have knocked it. A child's wind-up tin soldier, sitting on a nearby blanket, suddenly begins to whir and march erratically, its movements jerky and unnatural, before falling silent. The child's mother snatches it up, a fearful look in her eyes. "Nasty little things," she murmurs, "always playing up." You try to rationalize. The torch? Faulty bulb, perhaps. The tea? You must have placed it precariously. The toy? Old, worn-out mechanism. But the cumulative effect in this atmosphere of heightened tension and whispered rumors is undeniably unnerving. It's the feeling of being subtly, almost playfully, tormented by an unseen force, a force that seems to delight in small acts of disruption and annoyance. The fear of the bombs outside is a known quantity, a brutal, straightforward threat. This new creeping dread is different. It's a fear of the unknown, of the inexplicable, of your own environment turning subtly hostile, your own equipment becoming unreliable. You try to lead a sing-song, a common way to keep spirits up in the shelters. Roll out the barrel, or there'll always be an England. Some join in, their voices shaky but defiant. But even the singing feels strained tonight, punctuated by the muffled thuds of bombs falling somewhere above, and the unsettling knowledge that here, deep underground, another, quieter, more insidious enemy might also be at work. Suddenly, a young runner, an agile boy of about 14, who ferries messages between ARP posts and shelters, stumbles into your section of the shelter, his face pale, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Warden! Warden Arthur!" he cries, his voice hoarse. Cable Street. Direct hit on a tenement. People trapped. The rescue squad's there. But their main winch, the big one on the lorry, it's seized up solid. Just stop. They say it's like the gears are filled with concrete. They need every pair of ands they can get seized up solid, inexplicably. The words echo Old Man Hemmings' earlier complaint about the ARP post telephone. A cold dread, sharper and more focused than before, grips you. This isn't just a flickering lamp or a spilled cup of tea. This is a critical piece of rescue equipment failing at the worst possible moment. The gremlins, if they exist, are no longer just mischievous. They are becoming deadly. You and Birdie, guided by the frantic runner, arrive at Cable Street to a scene of hellish devastation. The tenement building, once home to dozens of families, is now a jagged, smoking ruin. Its front sheared off, revealing glimpses of shattered rooms like a grotesque doll's house. Flames lick at the exposed timbers, casting a lurid, dancing light on the rescue efforts already underway. The air is thick with the acrid smell of cordite, coal gas from a ruptured main, and the sickeningly sweet scent of burning possessions mixed with something indefinably more grim. The noise is a deafening symphony of destruction. The roar of the inferno, the crackle and groan of the collapsing structure, the desperate shouts of the rescue squad, the wail of a trapped woman, and the intermittent, chilling whistle of an ARP warden's whistle, signaling danger or a discovery. This is the sharp end of the blitz, a stark contrast to the relative safety of even the most crowded shelter. Modern disaster response involves highly trained teams with specialized equipment, thermal imaging, listening devices. Here, rescue is a brutal, often improvised affair carried out by ordinary men and women. ARP wardens like yourself, auxiliary fire service, AFS, volunteers, heavy rescue squads, working with basic tools, immense courage, and a terrifying awareness of the constant danger from shifting rubble, unexploded bombs, UXBs, and the ever-present threat of fresh attacks. The rescue squad leader, a burly, soot-blackened man named Chief Petty Officer Davies, a peacetime dock worker now thrust into this nightly battle, confirms the runner's report, his voice hoarse with fury and frustration. The main winch, Warden, seized up tighter than a miser's fist. We were trying to lift a concrete lintel. There's people under there. We can hear 'em. And the bloody thing just froze. The lads swear they heard a sound like a handful of boss. Spanners dropped in the gearbox right before it went. He glares at the offending winch on its lorry, a vital piece of equipment now maddeningly inert. Bloody factory gremlins, I reckon, he spits. Shoddy work, that's what it is. Or he trails off, flicker of something deeper, more uncertain, in his eyes, before he barks orders to resort to levers and brute strength. You and Birdie join the desperate efforts, your own fear for your safety pushed aside by the urgency of the cries coming from within the wreckage. You become part of a human chain, passing along buckets of water to the AFS men battling a section of the fire that threatens to engulf the area where survivors are believed to be trapped. The heat is intense, searing your face and lungs. Then, you're part of a team scrabbling at a mountain of bricks and twisted metal, your hands raw and bleeding, trying to clear a path. It is here, amidst the chaos and the choking dust, that the gremlin activity, or whatever it is, seems to escalate beyond mere nuisance. A crucial hydraulic jack, painstakingly positioned to lift a heavy beam, suddenly loses pressure. With a sickening hiss, the beam crashing back down, narrowly avoiding crushing a rescuer's leg. The man who was operating it swears he checked the valve, that it was secure. Later, a length of sturdy fire hose, just connected and beginning to spray precious water onto the flames, develops a series of inexplicable, neat punctures along its length, reducing its pressure to a useless trickle. There's no shrapnel nearby that could account for it, and the sounds, amidst the roar of the fire and the shouts, you begin to hear them more distinctly. Quick, furtive, scuttling noises from deep within the unstable piles of rubble. Sounds that are too light, too quick for rats of the usual size, and accompanied by faint, almost inaudible, high-pitched chattering or metallic clicks. When you mention it to another warden, he just gives you a weary, soot-stained look and says, "Rats, mate, place is crawling with them, or your ears are playing tricks in this din." But you're not so sure. These sounds feel different, more purposeful. Exhaustion is a heavy blanket, dulling your reactions, making your limbs feel like lead. Stress gnaws at your reserves. Did you really see a small, dark shape dart behind that fallen wardrobe just at the edge of your torch beam? Or was it just a shadow cast by the flickering flames? Did that length of electrical cable, sparking dangerously, twitch before that section of wall collapsed? Or was it the other way around? Your mind, starved of sleep and assaulted by constant adrenaline, is becoming an unreliable narrator of its own experiences. After what feels like an eternity of back-breaking, heart-stopping work, you help pull a young woman, conscious but badly injured, from a cavity beneath a collapsed floor. She's alive, a small victory in this ocean of destruction. You lay her gently on a stretcher, the grim-faced medics already moving in. You reach for your standard issue ARP first aid kit, the one you meticulously check and replenish before every shift, intending to apply a pressure bandage to a bleeding leg wound while waiting for the ambulance that may or may not make it through the bombed-out streets. You open the canvas satchel. The morphine syrettes are there, the triangular bandages, the burn dressing, but the large, sterile shell dressing, the most vital item for this type of injury, is gone. You know it was there. You checked it yourself not 3 hours ago. A cold dread, separate from the heat of the fires and the adrenaline of the rescue, washes over you. It's not just frustration now. This is sabotage that directly endangers lives, and it feels chillingly personal. Hours later, the all clear wails its mournful, drawn-out note across the shattered city. The immediate intensity of the raid has passed, leaving behind a landscape of smoldering ruins, the cries of the bereaved, and an exhausted, numbed populace. For you, Arthur, Your duties are not yet over. You must patrol your designated sector, checking for lingering fires, reporting damage, ensuring the integrity of the blackout is maintained against the possibility of returning reconnaissance planes, and assisting anyone you find wandering, dazed, and homeless. The blackout, once merely a necessary precaution, now feels like a heavy, menacing shroud. Navigating the familiar streets of your East End neighborhood has become a disorienting, almost hallucinatory experience. Landmarks are gone, obliterated by bombs. Roads are blocked by mountains of rubble. The darkness is absolute, a thick, velvety, almost tangible entity, broken only by the distant, hellish glow of fires still raging in other parts of the city, or the weak, unreliable beam of your own blackout torch, its light seeming to be swallowed by the oppressive gloom. In this profound sensory deprivation, your other senses become heightened, but also, terrifyingly, more susceptible to trickery. The psychological effect of prolonged immersion in such total darkness, especially when combined with extreme stress and exhaustion, cannot be overstated. It can warp perception, fuel paranoia, and blur the line between the real and the imagined. And tonight, as you make your rounds, it feels as if something is actively using the blackout's veil to play tricks on you, to hinder you, to deepen your growing sense of unease. A street sign you rely on to navigate a particularly confusing junction of narrow alleyways seems to be tilted, not obviously damaged by a blast, but subtly altered, pointing slightly in the wrong direction. You almost take a wrong turn down a dead-end alley choked with debris, a potentially dangerous mistake. Later, a pile of sandbags, was positioned to protect the entrance to a surface shelter, appears to have been shifted, partially blocking the access way. It's a small thing, easily dismissed as settling, or the work of other tired wardens making hasty adjustments, but it's another drop in the accumulating pool of an inexplicable, unsettling wrongness. Your own blackout torch, the one whose batteries you replaced after it failed in the shelter earlier, begins to dim and flicker again, its already weak beam becoming a frustrating, unreliable pulse of light at the most inconvenient moments. Just as you're trying to read a street name or navigate a particularly treacherous patch of rubble, you shake it in frustration, and it brightens for a moment, then fades again, as if being deliberately, mischievously toyed with. And the sounds, in the eerie silence between the dying roar of fires and the distant clang of emergency vehicles, you hear them more clearly now. Quick, light, scuttling sounds, always just at the edge of your hearing. From the depths of darkened alleyways, from behind boarded-up shop fronts, from the skeletal remains of bombed-out houses. They are too quick, too furtive for a cat, too light for a dog, and they are always accompanied by that faint, almost inaudible, high-pitched chattering or tiny metallic clicking that you first heard in the ruins. When you shine your fading torch beam in their direction, there is never anything there, just deeper shadows and the unsettling feeling of having been observed, of having disturbed something that prefers not to be seen. You try to tell yourself it's your mind playing tricks. You haven't slept properly in days, maybe weeks. You've witnessed horrors that would shake the strongest resolve. The constant fear, the adrenaline, the exhaustion, it's a potent cocktail for hallucinations, for paranoia, but the feeling of an active, unseen intelligence, a mischievous, perhaps even malevolent presence, using the blackout as its playground, its hunting ground, is becoming harder and harder to dismiss. The darkness is no longer just an absence of light. It is a curtain behind which hidden things move and plot. You find yourself questioning your own sanity. Are you succumbing to bomb happiness, the colloquial term for shell shock? Are you becoming as dotty as Old Man Hemmings, seeing gremlins in every shadow, every unexplained mishap? The fear of making a mistake, of failing in your duties, because your senses are being tricked, or because your equipment is being tampered with, adds a new, insidious layer to your already immense stress. As you pass the ARP post, you decide to duck in for a moment, hoping for a quick cup of lukewarm tea. If Hemmings has managed to get the kettle on, you find a notice you pinned to the sector map earlier, a list of streets with suspected UXBs, vital information for your patrols and for any demolition teams. You distinctly remember underlining the entry for Hawthorne Passage in red chinograph pencil. Now, the red line is neatly, almost surgically, erased, and a new, faint red line, almost invisible in the dim light, has been drawn under willow mews instead. A street you know was cleared only yesterday. It's too precise, too deliberate to be accidental smudging or damage. Someone or something has subtly altered a vital piece of information, a change that could have potentially lethal consequences if not spotted. The gremlins, it seems, are not just breaking things anymore. They are rewriting your reality. The altered ARP notice on your sector map is a deeply unsettling discovery, a concrete piece of subtle tampering that goes beyond flickering lights or misplaced teacups. It suggests an intelligence, a deliberate intent to cause confusion and potential harm. As the days and nights of the Blitz grind on, with their relentless cycle of sirens, bombings, and exhausted recovery, you realize that you are not alone in your unease, nor in your strange experiences. The gremlin, once a niche piece of RAF slang, a half-joking scapegoat for mechanical gremlins, has truly come home to roost in the bombed-out streets and crowded shelters of London. In wartime, especially under conditions of extreme stress, censorship, and information scarcity, rumors and folklore can spread like wildfire. People cling to any narrative that seems to offer an explanation for the inexplicable, a focus for their anxieties. Propaganda, both from domestic sources aiming to maintain morale and from the enemy seeking to undermine it, further muddies the waters of truth. In this environment, the gremlin legend finds fertile ground. Contrast this with your modern age of instant information, fact-checking, and scientific explanations for most phenomena. In 1940 London, the line between a mechanical fault, an act of sabotage by human hands, a stress-induced misperception, or the mischief of some unseen entity was terrifyingly, almost maddeningly, blurred. The whispering campaign about gremlins is no longer confined to the wry comments of old soldiers like Hemmings or the fantastical tales of airmen. It's everywhere, in the long, shuffling queues for rations, where tired women share stories of inexplicable household mishaps, a sewing machine jamming repeatedly on vital mending, a wireless set suddenly emitting strange static instead of the BBC News. In the damp, crowded public shelters, where families huddled together for warmth and safety exchange accounts of peculiar noises in their Anderson shelters, of tools vanishing from sheds, of allotment vegetables inexplicably failing to thrive in one patch while flourishing in another, at the factories, straining under immense pressure to produce munitions and essential war materials. Tales circulate of machinery breaking down at critical moments, of blueprints going missing, of small vital components being found subtly bent or scratched as if by tiny, determined claws. Some people, of course, dismiss these stories with a weary shake of the head, attributing them to nerves, to shoddy wartime manufacturing, or to the general chaos of life under bombardment. The government, through posters and public service announcements, warns sternly against careless talk and rumor-mongering that aids the enemy, implying that such tales are either enemy propaganda designed to lower morale or simply the product of overactive, stressed imaginations. But these official dismissals often have the opposite effect, driving the gremlin talk underground, making it seem more potent, more illicit, more believable to those who have had their own small, unsettling experiences. Of course they don't want us to know, a neighbor might whisper. They don't want panic, but we know what we've seen, don't we? You, Arthur, find yourself caught in this confusing maelstrom of belief and disbelief. Your own experiences, the faulty lamp, the dead telephone, the spilled tea, the missing first aid dressing, the altered map, are a constant source of private anxiety. You try to maintain a rational, skeptical front, especially in your official capacity as an ARP warden. But the sheer volume of stories, the unsettling consistency of certain details, the way your own senses sometimes seem to play tricks on you in the oppressive darkness and stress, it's becoming harder to dismiss it all. You might try, cautiously, to talk to a superior, perhaps your sector captain, a more experienced warden. You describe some of the equipment failures, the altered notice. He listens patiently, his face grim, then claps you on the shoulder. Stress of the job, Arthur, he says, not unkindly. We're all seeing things, hearing things. Get some rest when you can, and don't go listening to Hemmings and his fairy tales. Bad for morale. Or perhaps you confide in Bertie Miller, your young colleague. He might look at you with wide, fearful eyes and whisper that his own bicycle pump, essential for inflating the tires of the handcart used to carry rescue equipment, was found with its valve mysteriously superglued shut. The shared experience offers a strange, cold comfort, but also deepens the sense of a pervasive, inexplicable threat. The line between reality, stress-induced hallucination, and genuine supernatural mischief is becoming dangerously, terrifyingly thin. The gremlins, if they exist, are masters of this ambiguity. Their actions are always deniable, always attributable to something else, if you try hard enough. But the cumulative effect is a gnawing dread, a sense that the very fabric of your everyday reality is being subtly, maliciously unpicked by tiny, unseen fingers. The sensory details of this period are ones of constant, low-level anxiety, the low murmur of hushed conversations and cues, always seeming to stop when you draw near, a discarded newspaper page glimpsed in the gutter, featuring a half-joking, half-serious cartoon about gremlins in the works, the tired, drawn faces of people who look like they haven't slept properly in weeks, their eyes holding a mixture of stoic resilience and a haunted, faraway look, the pervasive feeling of a shared, unspoken anxiety, a city holding its breath, waiting not just for the bombs, but for the next inexplicable, unnerving little thing to go wrong. One particularly bleak evening, during a heavy raid, you are called to assist the AFS at a fire that has broken out near a critical public utility, a major water main pumping station that supplies hydrants for a large section of your borough. The fire itself is bad enough, likely started by an incendiary bomb. But as the firemen struggle to connect their hoses, they find the main control valve for that section, a heavy iron wheel that should turn smoothly, is completely seized. It won't budge, not even with 3 men straining on it. The damage, when they finally manage to get a closer look with a sputtering inspection lamp, looks suspiciously deliberate, not rusted shut, not obviously broken by the blast, but as if fine sand or some metallic grit has been poured into the gearing mechanism, a small, precise act of sabotage. The gremlins, it seems, are no longer content with mere mischief. They are targeting the city's lifelines. The deliberate and critical nature of the sabotage at the water pumping station marks a terrifying escalation. This isn't just a flickering lamp or a misplaced document. This is an act that directly hampers the firefighting efforts, that costs precious minutes and potentially lives. The official explanation, when it eventually comes after a hasty investigation by overworked engineers, will likely be stress on wartime infrastructure or possible damage from nearby blast vibrations. But for you, Arthur, and for the grim-faced AFS crew who battled both the flames and a stubbornly inert valve, the feeling is different. This felt targeted. This felt intelligent. The fear of spies and saboteurs, of a fifth column working to undermine the war effort from within, was a very real and pervasive anxiety in wartime Britain. Posters warned, careless talk costs lives, and keep mum, she's not so dumb, fostering an atmosphere of suspicion where anyone could potentially be an enemy agent. Now, this existing paranoia finds a new, even more insidious focus. What if the gremlins are not just mischievous sprites of folklore, but a literal, albeit unseen, arm of the enemy? Tiny saboteurs, capable of infiltrating places no human spy could reach, causing maximum disruption with minimal, almost untraceable actions. The focus of the gremlin activity, as you piece together the scattered reports and your own unsettling experiences, seems to be shifting. It's no longer just about causing annoyance or minor breakdowns. It's about striking at the heart of the civil defense and war effort. Warnings about unexploded bombs are mysteriously delayed because crucial telephone lines are found cut in tiny, almost invisible places. The wires, snipped too cleanly for accidental damage. Rations in a communal kitchen are found subtly contaminated, not enough to cause immediate, widespread sickness, but enough to cause discomfort, to lower morale to spread whispers of deliberate poisoning. A new batch of respirator filters for gas masks delivered to an ARP depot are found to have tiny, almost microscopic punctures, rendering them useless. The gremlins are no longer just a nuisance, a spooky explanation for everyday wartime frustrations. They feel like an active, invisible enemy agent, working in chilling concert with the bombers raining death from above. The psychological impact of this is profound. It's one thing to face a visible enemy, however terrifying. It's another entirely to feel that you are being undermined from within by forces you cannot see, cannot understand, and cannot effectively fight. The paranoia begins to take on new, more disturbing dimensions. Could a gremlin influence a person? Could their subtle, unseen manipulations cause a tired warden to make a fatal mistake? A stressed factory worker to overlook a critical flaw in a piece of equipment? A gunner to miscalculate a crucial shot? The idea that these tiny, unseen entities might not just be breaking machines, but also subtly twisting human actions, sowing confusion and error directly into people's minds, is a terrifying thought. You find yourself second-guessing not only your equipment, but your own actions, your own perceptions. Did you really lock that supply cupboard? Or did a gremlin unlock it after you? Did you relay that message correctly? Or did a whispered suggestion, too faint to consciously register, cause you to alter a crucial detail? You are directly involved in dealing with the aftermath of one such incident. A backup generator for a small field hospital set up in a reinforced school basement fails during a critical operation. The surgeons are plunged into darkness, relying on battery lamps held by trembling nurses. When you examine the generator later, the cause of the failure is baffling. A tiny, crucial pin in the fuel governor mechanism is missing, simply vanished. There's no sign of breakage, no obvious wear and tear. It's just gone. You find a tiny, almost invisible scratch mark near the housing, as if something very small and sharp had been used to pry the pin out. Old Man Hemmings, who accompanied you, just nods grimly. Clever little devils, ain't they? Know just where to bite. The official report will cite mechanical failure, but you share a look with the exhausted surgeon, a look that speaks volumes of a shared, unspoken suspicion, a dread that goes beyond the accepted realities of war. The feeling that you are fighting a war on two fronts, one against the visible human enemy in the sky, and another against an invisible, insidious, and perhaps not entirely folkloric enemy underfoot, becomes an almost unbearable weight. The sensory details of this period are ones of increasing paranoia and a sense of profound untrustworthiness in your surroundings. The smell of leaking gas from a subtly loosened pipe, fitting that you only just catch in time. The frantic shouts and confusion as a vital service fails inexplicably. The glint of something metallic and out of place. A tiny, strangely shaped piece of wire. A minute cogwheel that doesn't seem to belong to any known device. Found near a sabotaged mechanism. A piece of evidence you might pocket, then later doubt you ever saw. The cold dread of realizing that the enemy might be anywhere, capable of anything, unseen, unheard, yet devastatingly effective. One night, as you prepare to leave your small, cold flat for your ARP duty, you find your own gas mask, which you always keep in its case on the hall table, has been subtly tampered with. The rubber of the facepiece has a tiny, almost invisible slit near the exhale valve, a slit you are certain was not there when you last inspected it. It's small enough to miss in a cursory check, but large enough to render the mask useless in a real gas attack. The threat, already pervasive, has now become intimately, terrifyingly personal. The gremlins, or whatever is mimicking them, are no longer just targeting the city. They are targeting you. The discovery of the subtly damaged gas mask in your own flat chills you to the core. It is one thing to hear tales of gremlins affecting public services or distant factories, even to witness their mischief at a bomb site or within the ARP post. It is another entirely for their attention to turn so directly, so personally towards you. The war, already a relentless assault on your senses and your safety, now feels as if it has invaded the last vestiges of your private life, your supposed sanctuaries. In the historical reality of the Blitz, personal safety equipment like gas masks and steel helmets were not just symbolic. They were essential tools for survival, lifelines in a city under constant threat. The government issued strict instructions on their care and maintenance. To find yours tampered with, however subtly, would be a profound violation, inducing a deep sense of vulnerability. This isn't just about machines anymore. It's about your life. In the days that follow, this sense of being personally targeted intensifies. It's a campaign of small, unnerving incidents, each one deniable on its own, but forming a disturbing pattern when taken together. You return to your small, cold water flat after a grueling night on duty, longing for a few hours of fitful sleep before the next siren, only to find objects subtly out of place. Your ration book, which you always keep in a specific drawer, is found tucked inside a teapot. A framed photograph of your parents, your only remaining family, is turned to face. The wall, the matches you rely on for your gas ring, are inexplicably damp, despite the tin being closed. These are not acts of overt destruction, but of unsettling, psychological warfare, as if something is playing a cruel, unnerving game with your sanity, designed to make you doubt your memory, your perceptions, your ARP equipment, which you now inspect with an almost obsessive-compulsive rigor, continues to be a focus. The strap on your steel helmet, which you know was sound, snaps one night as you're rushing to an incident, sending the helmet clattering uselessly onto the pavement. Your emergency whistle, a vital tool for attracting attention or signaling for help in the darkness and chaos, vanishes from its lanyard, only to reappear days later in the pocket of a coat you haven't worn for weeks. It feels as if these unseen entities are testing you, probing your defenses, enjoying your mounting frustration and fear. The question of why you, specifically, would be targeted by these supposed gremlins is a torment. Are you imagining it? Is the stress of the nightly bombings, the lack of sleep, the constant exposure to trauma finally taking its toll, manifesting as paranoia, as a delusion of persecution? This is what a rational mind, your modern sensibilities listening in, might conclude. But for you, Arthur, living through it, the incidents feel too real, too too deliberate. Old Man Hemmings. When you cautiously mention one of these occurrences, simply nods with a grim understanding. They pick on some folks more than others, Warden. See a weakness they do. Or maybe you've seen something you shouldn't have. They don't like being noticed. Them gremlins. This last thought sends a fresh shiver of dread down your spine. Had you been too vocal about your suspicions? Had your attempts to find rational explanations for the early incidents somehow marked you out to these unseen entities? The fear is no longer just of what they might do, but of what they might know, of their silent, invisible observation. The sensory details of this personal sabotage are intimate and unnerving. The feel of that slightly loose helmet strap just before it gives way. A small detail that could mean the difference between life and a severe head injury. The unsettling silence of your own flat when you enter. A silence that feels not empty, but expectantly watchful. The acrid taste of constant anxiety in your mouth. A dryness that no amount of watery tea can quench. The frustrating search for a misplaced item. Knowing deep down it wasn't you who moved it, you begin to triple check everything. Door locks, window latches, gas taps, the contents of your pockets. Your life becoming a ritual of anxious vigilance. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow, filled with dreams of tiny, shadowy hands, of mocking, chittering laughter just beyond the range of hearing. One particularly grim night, while taking shelter from a fierce barrage in a cramped Anderson shelter in someone's back garden with a terrified family, the small hinged wooden door, usually secured with a simple latch, becomes inexplicably jammed. Bombs are falling perilously close, the earth shaking, the air filled with the roar of explosions and the shriek of shrapnel. The family inside is screaming. You and the father strain at the door, but it won't budge, as if a heavy object has been wedged against it from the outside, or as if the latch mechanism itself has been filled with grit. It's a terrifying, claustrophobic moment. By the time you manage to force it open, using a spade as a lever, the worst of that particular salvo has passed. But the incident leaves you shaken, convinced that this was no accident. The gremlins, or whatever shares their modus operandi, are no longer just toying with you. They are actively trying to trap you, to harm you. This realization spurs a desperate resolve. You cannot simply endure this. You have to try and understand it, to fight back, even if it means confronting something beyond all rational explanation. The incident with the jammed Anderson shelter door is a terrifying escalation. The feeling of being personally targeted, of being actively endangered by these unseen forces, galvanizes you, Arthur, and a few of your fellow ARP wardens who have also experienced or witnessed enough inexplicable events to be deeply unsettled. The official explanations of stress, faulty equipment, or even isolated human mischief are wearing thin. There is a growing, unspoken consensus among a small group of you that something else is at play, something that needs to be confronted or at least understood. The idea of a night watch is born out of a mixture of desperation, scientific curiosity, however amateur, and a stubborn refusal to be cowed. Old Man Hemmings, predictably, is all for it. his belief in gremlins now almost a fanatical certainty. Bertie Miller, young and impressionable, is terrified but also intrigued, his boyish sense of adventure warring with his fear. A couple of other wardens, a pragmatic, no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Davies, who has had her first aid supplies repeatedly ransacked in ways that defy explanation, and a quiet, thoughtful former librarian named Mr. Abernathy, who has been meticulously documenting small, strange occurrences, agree to join. The plan is simple, almost laughably so in the face of a potentially supernatural enemy: to stay awake all night inside the ARP post, the epicenter of many of their shared strange experiences, and to observe. They prepare for their vigil with a seriousness that belies the outlandish nature of their quarry. They sweep the floor meticulously, then sprinkle a fine layer of carefully hoarded flour around the edges of the room, hoping to catch tiny footprints. They balance empty tins on top of filing cabinets and shelves, set up threads across doorways, and make precise chalk marks on the positions of tools and important documents on the main desk. They brew a large pot of strong, bitter tea to ward off sleep, and arm themselves not with weapons, which they know would be useless, but with torches, notebooks, and a shared, nervous resolve. In a world torn apart by human conflict, their small, clandestine war against the unseen saboteurs feels both absurd and deadly serious. The early hours of the night pass with an agonizing slowness. The usual symphony of the Blitz rages outside, the distant drone of bombers, the thud of bombs, the chatter of ack-ack guns. But inside the ARP post, the silence is thick, broken only by the ticking of the cheap clock on the wall, the occasional sigh or cough, and the nervous sipping of tea. The flour remains undisturbed. The tins stay balanced. The chalk marks are untouched. Exhaustion begins to set in, making it harder to concentrate, harder to trust their tired senses. Was that a flicker of movement in the corner, or just a shadow cast by the single, heavily shaded paraffin lamp they are using to conserve battery power? Was that a faint scratching sound, or just the wind rattling a loose window pane? Then, in the deepest part of the night, during an eerie lull in the bombing, when the city outside seems to be holding its breath, it begins. A small, almost imperceptible metallic click from the direction of the dead telephone unit. All eyes snap towards it. Nothing visible. A few minutes later, a wrench, carefully placed on a shelf by Mr. Abernathy, slides silently, inexplicably, a few inches to the left. No vibration from a distant bomb could account for its smooth, deliberate movement. Mrs. Davies lets out a small, stifled gasp. The chalk marks on the sector map, the one you, Arthur, had found altered before, begin to change again. A line indicating a blocked road is slowly, almost imperceptibly, being smudged out, not by a human hand, but as if an invisible eraser is at work. Tiny, impossibly fine scratchings appear on the surface of the main desk, forming strange, spidery symbols that no one recognizes. And then they all hear it. Distinct, tiny, metallic clicks and rapid, light scuttling sounds, like the movement of many small, hard-bodied insects or tiny clockwork mechanisms seeming to come from within the walls, from beneath the floorboards, from the air itself. The atmosphere in the ARP post becomes electric with a mixture of terror and a strange, almost giddy excitement. This is it. This is not their imagination. Something is here. Old Man Hemmings grips his heavy ARP axe, not as if he intends to use it, but as a talisman against the unseen. Bertie is white as a sheet, his eyes darting everywhere. Mrs. Davies clutches a crucifix she wears around her neck. Mr. Abernathy is scribbling frantically in his notebook, his hand shaking. You, Arthur, feel a cold dread, but also a surge of adrenaline. You shine your torch beam into the darkest corners, under the desk, along the skirting boards. The scuttling sounds cease momentarily, wherever the light falls, only to resume in another part of the room. The shadows thrown by the single lamp seem to deepen, to writhe, to coalesce into fleeting, impossible shapes that vanish when you try to focus on them. The air grows colder, and there's a faint, almost imperceptible smell of ozone or burnt wiring. Then, one of the carefully balanced tins on top of the tall filing cabinet teeters and falls with a loud clatter, making everyone jump. As it rolls across the floor, you all see it, just for a fraction of a second, in the uncertain light, a tiny, dark, spindle-shanked shape, no bigger than a rat, but definitely not a rat, darting away from the fallen tin and vanishing into a crack in the floorboards. It is too quick, too ill-defined to be certain of what it was, but it was undeniably something. Something small, something fast, something that had, against all odds, sprung their trap. They have their proof. But proof of what, exactly, remains a terrifying, unanswered question. The fleeting glimpse of the tiny, darting shape, the clatter of the fallen tin, the undeniable evidence of objects moved and marks altered. These things hang in the stale air of the ARP post like a physical presence. The night watch has yielded results, but instead of bringing clarity, it has only deepened the mystery and amplified the fear. The immediate aftermath is a babble of hushed, excited, and terrified voices. Old Man Hemmings is triumphant. Gremlins. See? I told you. Little bleeders are real. Bertie Miller is shaking, unsure whether to be thrilled by the adventure or petrified by its implications. Mrs. Davies is practical, already examining the floorboards for the crack where the creature vanished, while Mr. Abernathy meticulously records every detail, every observation, his librarian's mind struggling to categorize an event that defies all known classification. You, Arthur, feel a profound sense of unease. You saw something, but what was it? A starved, unusually bold rat, its movements made strange by the dim light and their heightened expectations. A trick of collective perception, a shared hallucination born of exhaustion, stress, and the power of suggestion fueled by weeks of whispered folklore. Or was it truly one of them, a gremlin, a creature from the liminal space between nightmare and reality, made manifest in the crucible of the blitz? The ambiguity is a torment. In the cold, gray light of dawn, the group examines the evidence more closely. The flour on the floor shows a few tiny, almost invisible scuff marks near the crack where the creature disappeared. but no distinct footprints. The altered chalk marks on the map are undeniably there, changed with a precision that seems beyond the capability of a mere rodent. The wrench has indeed shifted position. The tools on the desk bear new, almost microscopic scratches. It is enough to convince the believers, like Hemmings, even further. For skeptics, or those like you, who desperately cling to the hope of a rational explanation, it is maddeningly inconclusive. The attempts to unmask the phenomenon, to find a definitive answer, only lead to more confusion. Over the next few days, the group, emboldened and yet more fearful, tries other methods. They set more elaborate traps, baited with tiny pieces of metal or drops of oil, based on Hemming's assertion that gremlins have a taste for such things. They try leaving out a wireless set, hoping to record the strange chittering or clicking sounds. But the gremlins, if that is what they are, seem to be aware of the heightened scrutiny. The overt activity in the ARP post ceases. The small sabotages, the unnerving tricks, become more sporadic, more subtle, almost as if the creatures are mocking their attempts to understand, to categorize, to control. Perhaps they do catch something. One morning, a trapdoor leading to a small, disused cellar beneath the ARP post, a space no one had thought to check, is found slightly ajar. Investigating, they find evidence of a makeshift nest, a few stolen biscuits, some shiny buttons, and, most disturbingly, a collection of tiny, almost perfectly spherical ball bearings, the kind used in delicate machinery, arranged in a strange spiral pattern. And in a dusty corner, they find a starved, mangy cat, which some of the more rational members of the group seize upon as the likely culprit for at least some of the noises and minor disturbances. "See," says a skeptical warden from another post, who has heard of their vigil. "Just a cat. You lot have been chasing shadows." The capture of the cat provides a convenient, mundane explanation that satisfies the authorities and many of the doubters. The official report, if one is even filed beyond a note about pest control, will likely cite rodent and stray animal activity exacerbated by war conditions. But for you, Arthur, and for the others who witnessed the events of the night watch, the cat doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the altered maps, the tools shifting on their own, the intelligent-seeming sabotage of the telephone or the winch. It doesn't explain the fleeting glimpse of that other shape, the one that was not a cat. The unmasking has failed to dispel the deeper mystery. It has, in some ways, made it worse by providing a plausible cover for something far stranger, far more unsettling. You are left in a state of profound uncertainty. The fear of the gremlins, once a half-believed rumor, now has the weight of personal, albeit ambiguous, experience. But to speak of it openly, especially now that a rational explanation, the cat, has been found, would be to invite ridicule, to be branded as shell-shocked, as unreliable. The horror is not just of the unseen entities themselves, but of the knowledge that you might be one of the few who perceives their true nature, trapped with a terrifying secret in a world that refuses to see. The mystery of what truly haunts the Blackout deepens, and the gremlins, if they are real, retreat further into the shadows, their existence a chilling, unanswered question mark hanging over your every waking and sleeping moment. The unsettling ambiguity of the gremlin investigation is soon overshadowed by a far more immediate and overwhelming terror. One cold December night, the Luftwaffe unleashes a firestorm upon London, a raid of unprecedented ferocity and destructive power, targeting the docks, the industrial heartland of the East End, and seemingly your specific sector with a terrifying precision. This is not the sporadic bombing of previous weeks. This is a concerted effort to break the city's spirit, to burn it to the ground. All thoughts of tiny, mischievous saboteurs are temporarily extinguished by the consuming reality of hell raining. From the heavens, the sirens wail their familiar, dreadful song, but tonight their pitch seems higher, more frantic, as if they too sense the heightened scale of the attack. The sky, already blacked out, is soon illuminated by an infernal, flickering orange glow as incendiary bombs rain down by the thousand, followed by high explosives that shake the very foundations of the earth. The noise is apocalyptic. The continuous, deafening roar of hundreds of bomber engines, the relentless, percussive crump, crump, crump of anti-aircraft batteries firing desperately into the night, the terrifying whistle of bombs falling, a sound that seems to have your name written on it, and the ground-shattering, gut-wrenching explosions that follow, each one a hammer blow against the city and its people. You, Arthur, are in the thick of it. Your duties as an ARP warden more critical and more terrifying than ever. The ARP post itself is rocked by nearby blasts, plaster raining from the ceiling, the windows, already boarded, blown inwards. Communication with sector control is almost immediately lost. Not just your post, but multiple lines across the borough are reported dead. This time, there is no subtle fault, no deniable mischief. The sheer scale of the bombardment is enough to explain the widespread failure of infrastructure. Or is it, as you and your fellow wardens, including a grim-faced Hemmings and a visibly terrified Bertie, venture out into the inferno to guide people to shelters, to fight incipient fires with stirrup pumps and buckets of sand, to offer first aid to the screaming, bleeding casualties. A chilling pattern begins to emerge, even amidst this overwhelming chaos. Critical equipment fails not just randomly, but catastrophically, at the worst possible moments, in ways that seem to go beyond even the expected damage of such a raid. A fire engine, racing to a major blaze at a warehouse filled with vital supplies, careens to a halt, its engine inexplicably seizing solid, blocking a narrow street and delaying other emergency vehicles. Its crew, seasoned firemen, swear the engine was fine moments before. Water mains, essential for fighting the spreading fires, don't just rupture from bomb blasts. They develop sudden, massive leaks in sections untouched by direct hits, as if their valves have been simultaneously, malevolently opened, or their pipes deliberately punctured from within. Shelter lights, powered by backup generators, extinguish across entire districts, plunging thousands of terrified people into absolute, suffocating darkness. A darkness now filled not just with the sounds of bombs, but with rising panic. It feels as if the gremlins, those unseen saboteurs, are actively working in concert with the Luftwaffe, exploiting the devastation, amplifying the chaos, turning the city's own defenses against itself. While the bombs provide the overwhelming force, the gremlins, like a fifth column of tiny, demonic engineers, perform the precise surgical strikes on the infrastructure, ensuring that the damage is maximized, that rescue efforts are crippled, that morale is shattered not just by fear of death from above, but by the terrifying realization that even your most trusted tools, your safest havens, can betray you. You are trying to lead a group of dazed families through a street lit by burning buildings towards a designated deep shelter, the underground station at Bethnal Green. The heat is scorching, the air thick with smoke, and the smell of burning chemicals, burning homes, burning lives. The ground trembles constantly. Shrapnel and debris rain down. Suddenly, the main hose being used by an AFS crew to hold back a wall of flame that threatens to cut off your escape route bursts with a deafening report, not from a puncture, but as if its coupling has been unscrewed with immense, instantaneous force. The water pressure vanishes. The flames surge forward. In the ensuing panic, as you try to find an alternative route, your powerful ARP whistle, the one you rely on to cut through the din and signal your group, emits only a pathetic, wheezing hiss. You fumble with it, thinking it's clogged with ash, but it feels wrong, as if something tiny has been wedged deep inside its mechanism. The feeling of being overwhelmed by both a visible, thunderous enemy and an invisible, silent, and utterly malicious one is a new dimension of terror. It's not just a battle for survival against bombs. It's a battle against a creeping, insidious madness that seems to have infected the very sinews of the city. This is not just war. This is a collaborated symphony of destruction, orchestrated from the skies and from the shadows beneath your feet, through a combination of sheer luck, desperate improvisation, and what feels like the last vestiges of your rapidly dwindling strength. You manage to guide your small group of terrified civilians, including the now almost catatonic Bertie Miller, away from the advancing firestorm and towards the relative sanctuary of the Bethnal Green Underground Station. The deep tube stations, burrowed far beneath the city streets, have become London's impromptu catacombs, vast, echoing shelters for tens of thousands seeking refuge from the nightly rain of death. Descending the stone steps into the bowels of the earth, leaving the inferno behind, should bring a sense of relief, of safety. But tonight, even here, in this deep, subterranean haven, the dread follows you, taking on a new, more claustrophobic and insidious form. The platforms and tunnels are crammed with humanity, a sea of pale, anxious faces illuminated by the dim emergency lighting of the station, or what's left of it. The air is thick, stagnant, smelling of unwashed bodies, damp concrete, fear, and the faint, metallic tang that always seems to accompany the presence of the unseen saboteurs. The familiar rumble of the bombs far above is a dull, percussive vibration. Here, a constant reminder of the world tearing itself apart just a few dozen feet over your heads. But it is not the bombs that are the immediate source of the new wave of unease rippling through the sheltered crowds. As you try to find a small space for your group on the crowded platform, you quickly realize that the gremlin activity far from being excluded from this deep refuge, seems to thrive here, as if the darkness, the labyrinthine tunnels, the complex network of pipes and cables are its natural habitat. Entire sections of platform lighting flicker erratically and then die completely, plunging swathes of terrified people into an even deeper, more unnerving blackness, broken only by a few hoarded candles or the weak beams of personal torches, many of which, you hear people complaining, are also failing inexplicably. Vital ventilation fans, essential for circulating air in these overcrowded subterranean spaces, begin to seize up with loud, grinding screeches or simply fall silent, their motors inexplicably burnt out. The air grows heavier, more suffocating. Panic begins to bubble just beneath the surface of the blitz-hardened stoicism of the Londoners. It's one thing to face the bombs with a grim resolve. It's another to feel your very sanctuary turning against you, its essential systems failing, one by one, due to an unseen, malevolent agency. Whispers, more urgent and terrified than any you heard on the surface, spread through the tunnels, the lifts. They're stuck between floors. The water pumps for the emergency sanitation. They're not working. I heard something skittering down the tracks in the dark part of the tunnel. These are not the vague rumors of before. These are immediate, tangible failures that threaten the safety and viability of the shelter itself. You, Arthur, as an ARP warden, feel compelled to investigate, to try and restore order, to offer some reassurance. You join a group of railway workers and other wardens, trying to get a section of lights working again. The wiring seems intact. The generator, before it too coughs and dies, was supposedly functional, yet no power flows. Examining a junction box by the weak light of a paraffin lamp, you find tiny, almost invisible nicks on the insulated wires, as if something with needle-sharp teeth has been gnawing at them. And inside the box, nestled amongst the cables, you see it, or rather, you glimpse it, for it vanishes in an instant. A tiny, metallic-looking cogwheel, no bigger than your fingernail, glinting for a fraction of a second before it seems to scuttle away into a conduit. It's identical to the one you thought you saw at the ARP post, the one you almost convinced yourself was a figment of your imagination. The fear is no longer ambiguous. It is cold, hard, and terrifyingly real. The gremlins are here, deep underground, actively working to turn this refuge into a trap. Later, you hear a commotion. Further down the platform, a maintenance crew, trying to access a critical electrical panel, finds the heavy steel access door, which they opened easily that morning, for an inspection, is now immovably jammed. The lock mechanism, they report, feels as if it has been filled with something hard and granular, like sand or metal filings. You try to venture down a service tunnel, following reports of strange noises, your heart pounding, your torch beam cutting a nervous swathe through the oppressive darkness. The tunnel is cold, damp, echoing with the drip of water and your own footsteps. You find nothing tangible, no definitive proof, but the feeling of being watched by countless tiny, unseen eyes, the sense of a mischievous, malevolent presence just beyond the reach of your light is overwhelming. You hear a faint, high-pitched chittering from a ventilation shaft, a sound that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, and you retreat, your courage failing you. The night stretches into an eternity of fear, both from the distant, vibrating threat of the bombs above and the immediate, insidious threat of the gremlins within. The deep shelter, once a symbol of safety, now feels like a labyrinthine tomb, its metallic arteries infested with an unseen, unknowable enemy. And as a fire, started by a rare direct hit on a ventilation shaft near the station entrance, begins to spread smoke and panic into the upper levels of the station, you realize your escape route, the main stairway, is now blocked by a press of terrified people and a secondary emergency exit. A heavy steel door leading to a disused side tunnel is the one whose mechanism is inexplicably, thoroughly, and terrifyingly jammed, trapped. The word echoes in your mind with a chilling finality. The fire in the upper levels of Bethnal Green Station is spreading, smoke beginning to curl down the stairwells, bringing with it the acrid smell of burning and a new wave of panic from the thousands sheltered on the platforms. Your main escape route is a surging, terrified crush of humanity, and the emergency exit, the heavy steel door that should offer a path to safety through the disused side tunnels, is jammed solid, its mechanism refusing to yield to the desperate efforts of yourself and a handful of other trapped wardens and railwaymen. The situation is critical. The gremlins, it seems, have orchestrated their masterpiece of deadly mischief. Hours of terror, exhaustion, and frustration have pushed you to your limit. Yet, as the smoke thickens and the cries of the trapped grow more desperate, a primal instinct for survival, that indomitable London spirit you've witnessed so many times, takes over. You, along with a grizzled railway engineer named Jock and a young, surprisingly strong woman whose name you don't even know, attack the jammed door with anything that comes to hand. A crowbar found in a maintenance locker, a heavy length of pipe, even the butt of an ARP axe. The metal groans and screeches in protest, but the lock, filled with whatever insidious grit the gremlins used, holds firm. Time stretches and distorts. The roar of the fire above, the screams, the suffocating smoke, it all blends into a nightmarish cacophony. You work in a frenzy, sweat stinging your eyes, your muscles burning, your lungs aching. It feels hopeless. The gremlins have won. This deep shelter has become a tomb. Then, just as you are about to collapse from exhaustion and despair, just as the first tendrils of black smoke begin to pour around the edges of the jammed door, there's a sudden, inexplicable give. The railwayman, Jock, lets out a hoarse cry of triumph as the crowbar bites deeper, with a final, convulsive effort from all three of you. The mechanism, with a sound like tearing metal and grinding stone, suddenly, miraculously, unjams. The heavy door groans open a few precious inches, enough to squeeze through. There's no time to question this sudden reprieve. Was it your desperate efforts finally overcoming the obstruction? Or did the gremlins, their cruel game played out, simply release their grip? You help drag the others through the narrow opening into the Stygian blackness of the disused tunnel. Moments before, the main platform area behind you is engulfed in a fresh wave of smoke and panic. The journey through the abandoned tunnels is another ordeal. Stumbling in pitch darkness, wading through fetid water, the air thick with the dust of decades, and always the unsettling feeling of being watched, of tiny things skittering just out of sight. But eventually, after what feels like an eternity, you find another service exit, a rusted grill that leads up to a quiet, bomb-scarred side street. Far from the main chaos of the station, you emerge, gasping, into the cold, gray, smoke-filled light of dawn. The all-clear siren is wailing in the distance, its mournful cry sounding less like a reprieve and more like a lament for the night's devastation. The city is a panorama of ruin, buildings burning or reduced to smoldering rubble, the sky bruised and weeping a sooty rain. The longest night, it seems, is finally over. You are utterly, bone-deeply exhausted, your body aching, your mind numb. Looking back at the city, at the subtle signs of inexplicable damage, amidst the overt destruction of the bombs, a twisted signpost here, a buckled railing there, a water hydrant inexplicably dry. The line between war damage and gremlin mischief is now hopelessly, terrifyingly blurred. Were they ever really there, these tiny saboteurs? Or was it all just the product of a city and its people pushed beyond the brink of endurance, their imaginations conjuring concrete explanations for the random cruelty of war and the failure of overstressed infrastructure? The ambiguity is a heavy shroud, as oppressive as the blackout itself. You are alive. That much is certain, but the fear of the dark and what unseen things might hide and plot within it will never truly leave you. As you help Jock and the young woman towards a makeshift first aid post, your hand brushes against your pocket. You feel something small, hard, and metallic. You draw it out. It is a tiny, strangely shaped cogwheel, with teeth too fine, too precise for any standard British machinery you know. You found it on the grimy floor, near the jammed door mechanism in the underground, just before you squeezed through. You'd forgotten picking it up in the chaos. Proof? Or just another inexplicable piece of debris in a city overflowing with it? You stare at the tiny, alien-looking object in your palm as the first rays of a reluctant sun try to pierce the smoky sky. The longest night has ended, but the questions and the chilling possibilities remain. And so, Arthur, you emerged from the longest night, a survivor amidst the smoldering ruins of a city that had once again stared into the face of annihilation and refused to break. You endured the nightly terror of the Blitz, the claustrophobic dread of the shelters, the constant gnawing fear, and the harsh realities of deprivation. But your ordeal was compounded by another, more insidious enemy, the creeping paranoia of the gremlins. From the first flickering lamp and whispered rumors, through inexplicable equipment failures that hampered rescue and defense, to the deeply personal acts of sabotage and the terrifying, ambiguous encounters during your night watch, and in the depths of the underground, you navigated a landscape where the lines between wartime chaos, mechanical failure, human error, and malicious, unseen agency became terrifyingly, hopelessly blurred. The tiny, strange cogwheel in your pocket is a cold, hard reminder of that pervasive, unresolved mystery. We must ask then, looking back through the smoke and ruins of that terrible time, could you have truly survived? Yes, perhaps you walked away from the bombs, from the fires, from the collapsing buildings, but could you have survived the relentless psychological warfare, the insidious erosion of your certainty, the gnawing fear that unseen forces were actively working against you, or worse, that your own mind, under the unbearable pressure of the Blitz, was conjuring these phantoms from the darkness? How do you fight an enemy you cannot see, an enemy whose very existence is a matter of terrifying conjecture, an enemy that might, in the end, only exist within the traumatized recesses of the collective imagination? Such an experience would inevitably leave deep, invisible scars for you, Arthur, and for so many who lived through those nights. The world would never quite feel as solid, as reliable as it once did. The trust in machinery, in systems, even in one's own perceptions, would be forever tainted by the memory of those inexplicable failures, those unsettling coincidences. The gremlin, whether a genuine supernatural entity or a powerful folkloric manifestation of wartime stress, became a symbol of that loss of control, that feeling of being at the mercy of capricious, unseen forces in a world turned upside down. It was a way, perhaps, to give a name and a shape to the random cruelty of war, to the maddening feeling that even beyond the human enemy, there was something else, something small and mean, delighting in the chaos. You step back now from the gray dawn over a shattered London, from the smell of smoke and the taste of fear, and return to your own well-lit, technologically saturated world. The Blitz is a chapter in history books. Gremlins are a quaint, almost amusing wartime legend, relegated to old films and nostalgic anecdotes. Or are they? Consider our own complex reliance on intricate systems we barely understand. Think of those moments when technology fails inexplicably at the worst possible time, when a crucial file vanishes, when a complex machine acts with what feels like a stubborn, almost malevolent intent. In times of great stress, when the familiar structures of our lives begin to creak and groan, what tiny, mischievous doubts, what whispers of unseen interference begin to gnaw at the edges of our own carefully constructed reality? Listen closely to the hum of your devices, to the intricate workings of the modern world. Everything is under control, isn't it? The gremlins of the Blitz may have retreated with the peace, but the human tendency to find patterns in chaos, to sense agency in the inanimate, and to fear what we cannot see or fully comprehend remains a timeless echo in the shadowed corners of our minds. Thank you for enduring the long night with us at Grim Histories for Sleep. May your own darkness be free of such insidious doubts, and your machinery ever reliable. If these explorations of history's shadowed corners bring you a measure of contemplative peace, do consider liking and subscribing for more. Until our next journey into the past, sleep well and mind the gremlins.